As Herbert Johnson once said, in today's society, men have many problems. Many lack community, independence, brothers, father figures, mentors, friends, and especially sex. Since 2008, the rate of male virgins has increased significantly, and some experts point out that League of Legends may be largely responsible for this. These isolated and depressed men turn to groups in today's world, groups from which they find what they need most and what they sometimes desire most: empathy. People who understand them and people who see the world the way they do. Robert Sapolsky says that one of the defining characteristics of a group is the creation of its own language. And many of these groups of sad men and teenagers without their own thoughts on the internet tend to create their own language as well, giving rise to the terms such as incels, alpha males, red pills, blue pills, and several others that define human beings by their sexuality. Much like LGBT if you think about it. As Freud would say, it's all about sex, baby. Many of the things that these guys talk about tend to be very sinister. For example, sometimes you wonder if this isn't some kind of psychological problem. But even if it is, would it change anything after all? Who has mental health these days? Many red pill and alpha males try to identify themselves as Neo from the Matrix, who escaped these lies of reality imposed by a system. But how would defining yourself in a category that was created by other people and is used by a large majority of others be any different? What makes you think that you yourself are not simply entering another matrix that denies you the ability to see reality itself? Isn't this the best definition of red pills you've ever heard? It is for me. Knowing that you have a problem, understanding what that problem is, and knowing how to solve it are three different things. So let's try to understand first, starting with incels. In a video from ContraPoints, he explains the mindset of many of these men. First, they experience rejection and isolation. Then they think they are not attractive to women, which may even make sense. Then they imagine that they will never be attractive to any woman, that they will be alone forever and never have a partner, that's why they will never be happy, that's all women's fault, that feminism empowers women to do these things, that social media is responsible for these thoughts, that humanity is lost, and that the only option is to lie down and die. Oh. Well, in clinical psychology, this can be called catastrophizing. Even though the arguments from 1 to 2 make some sense, when you look at 1 to 10, you can see that there's a complete lack of logic, making you imagine that the rationality these guys value so much may not be so rational after all. Another thing that red pills and alpha males like to cite a lot is evolution itself, saying how females are hypergamous and that only mate with those guys who are at the top of a hierarchy, whether in terms of beauty or money. And with that, they apply the Pareto distribution, a concept from statistics that says that in every society there is a rule of nature defining that 20% of people will have 80% of the things. For example, 20% of the world's population has 80% of the world's wealth. 20% of artists compose 80% of the hit songs, and 20% of the scientists do 80% of the research. It's a universal mathematics, so to speak. On red pill, this is used to say that 20% of guys get 80% of girls. But a more interesting hypothesis is the Pygmalion effect. In social psychology, it is to say that the way you deal with people makes them react differently to you, and the way they react to you makes you behave differently, and repeat the whole process. So because of these guys aren't copulating, they start to have certain thoughts and behaviors. This ends up changing the way women see them, and the way they see themselves, and the way they behave, and so on. For example, they might be depressed, wanting to have positive feelings, seeking sex as an option for that, having no social skills or abilities that justify or help them get that or express this desire, so they, use a hentai t-shirt because they think girls will not understand if they say what they want and they want to express their sexuality anyways. But then girls will not care about them because, well, they think that this guy is weird for using a shirt like that. In some sorts of therapies like systemic therapy, if a person is in a group and the group has a problem, it doesn't matter who started the problem. What matters is what is done to solve it. And if you say that the person who caused the problem was the other person and she's the one to blame, then the person or this person is the only one responsible for changing the situation. But when you take responsibility for the actions you are taking, then you have the ability to change the way others react to you as well. And with this, you create a new cycle of relationships. Cognitive psychology or behaviorism is the school of thought that categorizes people by personality disorders and therapeutic labels. Then you hear things like borderline, narcissism, OCD, these are all behaviorist terms. But there's also humanism, which says that these labels and categories are actually seen as harmful sometimes. Many of them limit people to seeing themselves only as the problem they have, to the point where they use them as an excuse to not take actions they will like. If you're a teenager and would really like to have a girlfriend, it is much easier to say that you have autism, ADHD, or even better, that you're an incel, and that it is women's or even your biologist's fault than to take actions that make you attractive or even compensate for these faults if they even exist. After all, if the cause of your problems is other people or even biology, you are taking away from yourself your own ability to solve them. According to humanism, everyone has problems, and that doesn't make you special. What really makes you different is the way you deal with those problems. Existentialism and phenomenology follow the same principle. They are schools of thoughts based on Heidegger, Sartre, Kierkegaard, and Nietzsche, philosophers much adored by, incels. And it is also a therapeutic approach that rejects the production of an absolute truth, saying that existence precedes essence, as Sartre put it. That is, they reject the idea that there is a biologically and socially determined truth. What matters is the individual himself. Very much unlike black pill guys who see sexuality determined by the size of your chin, and if you were born wrong, there is no alternative but to be born again. But even so, categories are necessary for people to have a basis of who they are and who they are not. But many of these categories end up being distorted, such as this social sexual hierarchy theory, which defines men as sigmas, alpha, betas, and even other terms. Sigmas are socially isolated men who do not fit in the social circles of the majority. Apparently, they also have a unique, specific skill that they only know how to do. They have a different lifestyle, and they do not have many close friends, and several other symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. Alpha males, on the other hand, are those guys who get several women and are at the top and consider themselves better than everyone else. One of the main characteristics of narcissism, by the way, this term was initially used to describe wolf packs, alpha males, but its creator, David Mack, himself went to say that in reality these wolf packs are just families of wolves, and the alpha is nothing less than the father of these families. And it makes you wonder, who so are the betas? According to Robert Sapolsky, human beings have an incredible ability to relate and create groups with each other, even if we don't share the same blood. When you look at guys like Andrew Tate or any red pill / alpha male influencer and just see what these guys are really doing, you realize they are literally creating communities, creating a family, perhaps in which they are at the top. In other words, the alphas tend to be their own YouTubers and influencers, and their betas or betas are actually the audience that follows them. Just like in this video, you are all my little betas. Thank you so much. But the problem is that in a larger society, the only true alphas will be like a president. And on YouTube, it would probably be, T-Series, Mr. Beast, or even me. It really depends on the time you're watching this video. But Franz de Waal, one of the scientists who helped to popularize the term alpha males, describes how them are actually highly empathetic, even more so than females. In humans, this capacity for empathy, called agreeableness, is a personality trait, and it actually tends to be higher on women than men. While women tend to prefer groups, social communities, and nursing and psychology courses, men prefer objects, status, and computer science and engineering courses. But if alphas are the opposite of this, it goes completely against the attitude of many of these guys who consider themselves alphas and who are mostly just, well, jerks who disregard the fact that women have other interests besides sex. Well, not all of them, of course. But it is very common in these communities for these guys to say that women cheat and that women are horrible, etc. But one of the greatest truths in psychoanalysis is the fact that we are what we judge the most in others. So if you observe some things that these guys like women only judge men by their appearance, women are inferior, women cheat very easily, that they only cause headaches, and that they only look for someone to support them, these guys would actually be making a projection in this sense. Because when Peter tells me about John, I know more about John than I know about Peter. For Lacan, we see others as reflections of our interests. When they say that women only want money, then it will be mostly because they only can get women if they pay, and that's the only way they can do to get them. And if women only cheat, maybe it's because in fact they only look for women who want sex. And if they changed this worldview of only wanting that, then they would certainly change the people around them and the way they relate and the way they see them as well. As Socrates would say, know yourself. Because if you don't know yourself, you are prone to projecting your attitudes onto other people. It's the Pygmalion effect all over again. The way you act, the way you see the world changes how the world, how others relate to you, how they present themselves to you, and it changes how you present and express and, well, think for yourself all over again. In the end, they are not only trying to categorize themselves, but they are trying to categorize women and men and the entire world. This need for categorization is one of the things that defines even OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is made up of two things. First, an obsession, which are thoughts that the person has and cannot get out of their head, such as thinking about sex 24 hours a day. And the second thing is a compulsion, which are activities that people tend to do to get rid of these thoughts, such as pornography, masturbation, or even work. Taking one of the most positive aspects of these groups, which would be the no-fap, the idea that if you stop fapping every single day, you gain supernatural powers, or in fact, you just start to have a healthier life. This is really cool and makes a lot of sense, but not because you just stopped ejaculating per se, but as Heidegger would say, if you stop using time for something, you start to use it for other things. And in these other things, you start to see possibilities that you didn't see before, that you didn't saw before. What sometimes make these guys clean up their rooms, cut their hairs, get a job, leave home, and become members of society. They start to value themselves, and with that, they start to value other people as well, and to give something valuable to others. Just like alpha males apparently are those who are more empathetic, testosterone is also a hormone that produces or increases the prosocial behaviors as well. My main criticism with alpha males and with this psychology is that it sometimes can be seen only as a way to justify egoism, but not an egoism because, well, achieving those things and those desires that you have will be better for you and for everyone else. No, because it is a way to avoid doing all of those things. So all of those things are necessary to develop new abilities, to make and to build yourself as a better person. So instead of doing this, instead of admitting your own thoughts or your own inadequacies and to striving to be better, to become better, many of these men, like incels, alpha males, red pills, and so on, all of them use these categories to not change who they are. So categories define themselves as, well, a stone. And so they never learn, they never change. And now they have this excuse because of this category to not do any of those things as well. At least stop accessing websites and YouTube channels that are messing with your mental health, like, well, 90% of modern YouTubers. I have a video on the channel about this, and if you're a red pill, please subscribe. I can be your friend and you can give me money. Just check the link in the description, book a session with me. My name is Julius Caesar, I'm a clinical psychologist in Brazil, and I see you in the next video. Bye bye.